we have people in the room here, so hopefully you're hearing me okay. And hello, everyone. So good to see everybody, or not see you, but you see me, and I know you're invisibly there watching somehow. That makes me feel a little awkward, but here we are. So we're really excited. This is our first webinar in a while. This is also our first webinar since SiteStacker Conference 2025. So if you guys were at SiteStacker Conference, which not many of you were, because this is actually a repackaged session that we did at SiteStacker Conference. And we wanted to make sure that there was space for people who didn't attend to catch some of that content. Of course, it's always better in person. That's why people go to conferences. But a lot of this is some of the content that we had rolled out at SiteStacker Conference. So this is the first session. This was actually the main session, the first opening session of SiteStacker Conference. And it's going to be a good one. It's going to be kind of high level. And I'm really going to want to take this time to challenge the way that you think about SiteStacker and the way that you even think about yourself. So it's going to get kind of interesting. Hopefully you find it helpful. And by the end, we'll have some practical next steps. And then one thing to look forward to here is that as we start to do webinars on a more consistent basis, that's a really big thing we're going to be doing. We're going to start with really repackaging a lot of the most valuable content from SiteStacker Conference so that you can reap again more and more sessions, more and more insights, announcements, all that fun stuff that we did at SiteStacker Conference, and you can participate in that. But also, we're really going to be honing in on trainings. We're going to be honing in on possibilities because, as you'll find out today, SiteStacker has a lot of possibilities, and we want to really express those possibilities articulately and also inspire you guys to explore those possibilities because there's a lot that can be done here. So with that in mind, a couple things to note. Just like always, we are going to have a prize at the end of some coffee, some old Florida coffee beans, mug, and all that good stuff. So stick around to the end. We'll be doing a name spinning contest to see who will win. And in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and get started. So what's today's session? Today's session is about Missional Innovator. You'll see it right here. You'll see it right here. This idea of being a missional innovator. What is a missional innovator, and what does that have to do with SiteStacker? So I only have a limited amount of time and a lot of content to get through. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully you guys are staying with me as we go through this. And as always, please leave any questions in the chat, and we will address them towards the end of the session. I love a good Q&A. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will get started. So as you can see, Missional Innovator, there's a brand for you. And also that's the Apostle Paul in a neon setting. So that's super fun. So I did make that image with AI, which is great. AI image creation is amazing these days. But I really want to take a moment to hone in on this concept. This is something that we have been thinking about for a while now. And it's this idea of being a missional innovator. And I think it's something that has inspired me, has inspired our team, and now has inspired, hopefully, a lot of people who use SiteStacker and participate in the greatest mission of all, which is the mission to share the gospel to all who haven't heard it throughout the whole world and see the impacts that that has. And I think that's why we're all here. And that's actually one of the beautiful things about SiteStacker is it's a centerpiece of missional work. We aren't a SaaS platform that just works with anyone. This is a product that is worked with for missions organizations, for organizations that have the mission of the gospel at the foundation of who they are. And that's everyone here. I'm so happy that I can say the people watching this are dedicated and really dedicating their lives towards that mission. So what does this mean, missional innovator? Well, let's break it down. And as all things, it breaks down with a history lesson. Listen, throughout the whole session, there's a couple questions I ask. This is interactive. You can join. You can scan that QR code with your phone, and you'll be able to access these session slides after. Or you can enter this code at the top here, and you'll be able to join at any point. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We're going to get right into it. So missional innovator, we need to define some words. So first word is missional. What is this word? What does it mean? Let's do a little bit of a history lesson. I think that as we go backwards, we get better definition of what we're doing in the present day and also where we're going. In order to know where you're going, you have to see where you've come from. So This idea of missional, it actually, the word stems from the Latin root missio, which means to be sent. So actually, the idea of being missional is not an idea of just having a mission. It's actually an idea of I was sent for a purpose. It's a fundamentally fundamentally an important principle when it comes to identity. So that being said, this word missio was used exclusively in the Bible and in the early church to refer to Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So, this concept of being missional, missio, was a concept that was inherited from the display that Jesus made when he came to this earth, because he was that first sent one. He was sent by the Father to come and redeem humanity, and then the Holy Spirit was also missio. He was sent because Holy Spirit, God, Jesus, the Trinity, they're all God. Holy Spirit was sent to us to be able to continue the mission forward. So when we have the Holy Spirit, we actually have purpose, because that mission that we inherit from him is the mission to go and be sent and to glorify God. And so that's the concept of missional. So really what I'm trying to get at here is this idea of being missional is a strictly Christian idea. Like, this is not, you can't really truly be missional and not be serving the Lord, because this idea of being sent you means you need to be sent, and there's no greater call than to be sent by the one who created everything. So again, I didn't know, I'm sure you weren't expecting to go on the webinar and get a sermon, but here we are. But I think it's really important to understand the roots there, and really this word being missional started to evolve over time. And in a sense, it was really the whole church said, as an institution, we're missional. And that was the way it was understood for many, many years. And then came the Reformation, where everything became a little bit more personal, right? The scriptures were spread so that the individual could read scripture, and it was more accessible than ever. And out of that began to develop this idea that as an individual, I have a mission. That's not just the institution's mission. It's actually, I have a personal mission from God, because I have the Holy Spirit dwelling inside of me. And therefore, everything I do is a product of being sent. And this is where you start to see this shift, where being missional isn't just becoming a monk and going to a monastery, but you can be missional and be working a day job, which is crazy, right? You bring the mission to whatever you're doing. And I think that's a really cool shift that took place there. So then the other thing that happens is, really, as we define missional, we have to combine all of that. And what I've defined it as is, to be missional is to find eternal purpose and motivation in everything you do. That's really what at the heart of what missional is I am seeing the eternal purpose in every single thing I do, which also brings meaning and purpose to every little thing. And that's very much a biblical principle. If you read Thessalonians, you'll see that biblical principle rooted throughout the entire book. So that's what being missional is. So then we have to define innovate. What is the word innovate? And I find this to be the most fascinating historical study. Innovate has become a buzzword. I mean, you see it everywhere. Everybody wants to innovate. And this idea of innovation is very attractive, because it's the idea of always kind of moving forward. And really, if you think about how the world thinks about the word innovate, and maybe this is how you think of the word innovate, the word innovate is usually thought of in regards to technology, right? So if you think of innovation, you're usually thinking of AI at this stage, or what AI can do. But 10 years ago, it was probably social media, or even just headless CMS, and all. There's a bunch of different innovations, but they're usually correlated with technology. But I want to take a moment to challenge that thought, because innovation is so much bigger than just technology. Innovation is at its core, it's a philosophy that impacts everything you do, similar to being missional. And so let's go ahead and study that really quick. Hopefully you brought your notes. From the Latin root innovar, that's the where the word innovate comes from. And that word innovar means to renew. And in fact, the root of that word innovar was used in the Bible many times. And every single time that word was used, it was referring to the renewal that Christ brought. Remember, he said, I am making all things new. And so this idea of innovation is inherited from this idea of renewal, which is truly a biblical idea. And this is where it becomes really cool, because while we don't necessarily correlate innovation and the word innovate with Christianity, the truth is It is fundamentally founded in Christianity. In fact, without Christianity, without Christ, there is no concept of renewal, right? There's only the concept of decay. But Christ brings this concept of renewal, which is innovate. And so, with that being said, this is where it gets really cool. The English word for innovate was actually not in existence until the 1500s, which is that same period of the Reformation, which is so wild. So, the word missional begins to take on a new meaning in the 1500s, but something else happens in the 1500s. The word innovate is created, and that word is created as actually a term of slander. It actually was a term that was akin to heresy, because what was happening is the Reformation was really challenging the institutions that had been brought up over the years. And in the response to that challenge, the institutions would call those people innovators because they were causing heresy. They were deviating, they were changing things. And that was akin to heresy. If you were called an innovator, you were being accused. So back then, the idea of being an innovator was not attractive. In fact, it was basically like being called a heretic. Why? Because you were challenging the power structures. You were challenging the structures that were in place. Why were you challenging those things? Because innovation is always not focused on the power structure or the things that are set up, but it's focused on the outcome. So we want to improve the outcome. So we change some of the ways we get to that outcome, or we renew some of the ways we get to that outcome. That is what innovation is. And I thought that was fascinating. And so what happened is that that term was used to really try to silence and stop innovation. And what actually ended up happening is the term took on a new meaning where now, as we mentioned before, in the whole world, the idea of innovation is attractive, the idea of it. But sometimes what I've found is while we all might like to say innovate, we all might like to preach that and say, I want to be innovative. Sometimes we don't actually take the time to understand what that actually means. Because the truth is that innovation can be seen as a threat to those who are more concerned with power structure than outcome. And also, innovation is always uncomfortable. It's always uncomfortable. Why? Because what happens is we spend a lot of time trying to build processes. Trust me, I know. That's what we do at SiteStacker. We're trying to build processes. And what happens is you settle into a process and you kind of get comfortable with that process, with that structure, with whatever you call it. And what happens is innovation is finding the holes in that process that can be improved and then tries to renew it. But what does that do? It directly attacks your comfort. And so what happens is innovation so often stagnates because the power structure tries to suck it out, just like the origin of the word. The word innovate was tried to use to stop innovation. And that's still what happens today. And we have to be careful not to allow that to be our perspective as missional organizations, as people, to never allow innovation to stagnate because of our comfort or our concern with the power structure. So that's innovate. So let's define it. I believe innovate is the ongoing process of renewal in order to propel better outcomes. You could even call this innovation. That's probably more proper, but it's not just creating new things or inventing new things. What we kind of think it's not inventing new technologies. It's just the ongoing process of renewal in order. And this in order is so important to propel better outcomes. So innovation is focused on the outcome. And because it's so concerned with the outcome, it's always going to renew the process to get better outcomes. Hopefully this is making sense. I can't see your faces, so I can't tell if you're dozing off right now or not, but hopefully it's all coming together. So when you bring those two things together, you'll see that innovation driven by missional purpose is at the heart of what helped propel the gospel from the beginning. In fact, you see this even in the very beginning, right? Here's a little simple timeline of Christian innovation. And it really started Jesus's ministry. I mean, if you think about what Jesus did when he came to this earth, is he challenged the power structure and tried to renew their interpretation. And what's really interesting is he wasn't coming up with something new, right? Because Jesus is the one who gave those commands. So what he was actually doing is he was renewing their understanding so that they could have a better understanding of what it was always supposed to be. So it's almost like God has this plan of how we're supposed to function. And innovation is our process of renewing until we get to the original plan of how things are supposed to operate. And that's what Jesus was doing. He was challenging the Pharisees, and they hated him for it because it was challenging their power structure. But I believe the reason they hated it was because they weren't focused on the outcome. They were focused on the comfort that existed with their place in the current structure. And that's something that is really a warning sign through the Gospels that we can never allow that to be our hearts. We have to always be focused on innovating and renewing so that we don't lose the focus. But not only that, what I love is to see that innovation is at the heart of Christianity. In fact, throughout Christian history, which is really the world history, because if you think about the timeline, Jesus is 0 AD. So even the whole world counts their time based on when Jesus came. But if you look at the history since Jesus has come and you see the progression of the church, what you'll notice is innovation was at the foundation of all the progression. In fact, think about when Jesus ascends, you have Pentecost and the early church community. And Pentecost is now you're speaking in different languages. All of a sudden, you're transcending cultural boundaries that didn't happen very often at that time. But not only are you transcending cultural boundaries, but you start this concept of outreach, which is so innovative because back then you have to understand in the pagan days, you didn't outreach. You didn't reach out to people and convince them that your God was true. You just knew that everyone had different gods and you accepted that. It's called syncretism, especially in the Roman days. So this idea that you can go out and transcend cultural boundaries and then in those cultures proclaim a one true God that is a personal God was completely innovative. So the entire structure of outreach is founded in Christianity. The entire structure of reaching out to people in need is also founded in Christianity. None of these concepts existed before Christianity, but because we were focused on the outcome of the gospel, we innovated the processes and structures that we built. And that's what happened. And all throughout the Christian history timeline, you see this. In Constantine's era, you see worship become more institutionalized. And so you see a more hierarchical structure to it. And then when you get to the Reformation, you see the printing press come through and scripture access gets revolutionized. And you also see, by the way, tons of scientific developments, tons of mathematical developments, all types of developments in the world that we rely on today were based on Christian innovation driven by mission. And even recently, you have the missionary movement, which is let's go out and transcend the cultures even more to share the gospel. And then now you have the missional church, which is still relevant today. And these are just some high points. I mean, if we wanted to go through the timeline of Christian innovation, it would take far longer than I have time for in this webinar. But I'm trying to restore that heart because at the end of the day, everyone on this call, hopefully on this webinar, I guess it's not a call, but everyone who really works in SiteStacker, everyone who's in this webinar, you have this DNA inherited. This is your missional DNA. And that's why it's really important to actually study Christian history and see the progression that brought us here, because that missional DNA will inspire you to take it the next step forward. And this is what's been so fun about this study is I've found myself excited about the future when I look back and see the developments that have happened in Christianity. And I think sometimes we can get too pessimistic because we think it's out of our hands. But the only reason it's out of our hands is because we've kind of taken our foot off the gas. And I think as Christians, we have to put our feet back on the gas, 2 feet, put both feet on the gas, just go all in so that we can take the lead in innovation rather than let the culture that is not Christian, that doesn't understand the process of renewal, take the lead on innovation. And that's something that's been burdened in my heart for a long time. And that's really fundamentally why SiteStacker is how it is and why it's unique and why we do things that are unique and why we're focused on strictly missions, because that's our heart, is to bring innovation forward in missions so that we can propel that mission forward even more. And so let's just kind of wrap up this section and then we'll get to things that are relevant. I know you're wondering, when are we going to talk about SiteStacker? We will. It all correlates, but being missional and being an innovator are both concepts introduced by Christ and carried out by Christians. That is something that is fundamentally important to understand. That innovation is not something that's outside of Christianity. It's something that's founded in Christianity. And this makes sense because if you think about it, the truest innovation, because remember, innovation is focused on the outcome, not the structure. It will renew the structure to get a better outcome. And being missional is always going to be focused on the outcome. So think about it. The truest innovation is always going to be motivated by the truest mission. So if the mission is important, the more important the mission, the more impactful the innovation. So those who are truly missional, if you're truly focused on the outcome, you're as a natural byproduct going to be the most innovative. That's just the reality. And if you're not focused on the mission, you'll probably be less innovative. And so that's something that I want to challenge everyone is, if you're feeling like you're not innovative, maybe it's a good time to take a look at the mission and not all of the noise that invades our day. We can't avoid the noise always, but sometimes it's good to remind ourselves why we do it, so we can bring that innovation, that missional innovation, back to our worlds. And this is really the missional innovator cycle, right? And this is something that I think is a cycle that's just carried on through Christian history. Is because we're focused on the mission, we innovate. And when we innovate, it paves out room to focus on the mission more, because every innovation should bring more efficiency and more impact. And so that allows us to focus even more on the mission. And because we're focused even more on the mission, we innovate more. And it's that missional innovator cycle that has led us to where we are today in the history of Christianity. And it's also the cycle that I want to continue. I think we should all desire to continue, so that we can see that cycle move us forward more and more for the glory of God. So, to summarize, let's take a look at who missional innovators are. Missional innovators always look to renew and optimize. We're always trying to find ways to improve. We aren't loyal to human power structures, but to God. Even if those human power structures are part of a ministry or part of something that is dedicated to God, it's not our loyalty. Our loyalty is to God alone, and those power structures exist because of that loyalty. They don't disrupt. Just because you're innovating doesn't mean you disrupt for the sake of disruption. That would be just chaos. And our God is a God of order, not chaos. We disrupt for the sake of impact. In fact, I would go on to say we will always disrupt for the sake of impact, but never disrupt for the sake of disruption. That's missional innovators. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. That was a nice little 20-minute intro. So, really, what I wanted to do was illustrate this concept of missional innovator, because one, it's something that we are going to be going all in on. This idea of being a missional innovator. I believe that everybody on the SiteStacker team, I've told our team this, is a missional innovator, and that's who we hire. That's who we're looking to build with. And we have some awesome missional innovators on our team. If you've met them, then continue to develop that relationship. They're here to help. But also, in the same token, I believe we have so many users, so many people who use SiteStacker who are missional innovators. And I want to give that to you. I want you to realize that you are a missional innovator. If you're focused on that mission and you're focused on innovating, then that's who you are. And that's why we're going all in on this concept. And I'll talk about how we're going to go all in on this towards the end of this session. So park the brakes there, or at least take a mental note or a physical note or a digital note or the AI transcript that you're using. I don't know, but make a note of this. Missional innovator. That's who you are. That's a little bit of the history of why that's important. And I believe that SiteStacker plays a direct role in this. And that might be your question. How does SiteStacker fit into all of this? Well, it's a good question, and we're going to answer it. But really quick, I'm going to take a sip of coffee, if you don't mind. I know this is a party foul, but okay, you could take your sip there too. All right, so let's move on. We're going to kind of zone in now to SiteStacker and why this idea of ongoing process of renewal that's focused on outcome is actually what SiteStacker was made for. And I don't know if everyone really understands that concept. So really quickly, if you have joined this session, then you can do this. If not, then that's fine. We'll just move on. But I'm kind of curious. You can join using that code at minty.com. Can you say what you use SiteStacker for? These are the different segments. I don't know if everyone's joining. Hopefully it's all working. If not, I think we might keep moving. Oh, wow. Okay, I just had a lag. Online giving, donor management website, missionary dashboards. Boom. We're getting waves of things here. So cool. What you'll see, and I can actually show you, we have the data from when we did this at SiteStacker conference, is this is very, very much fast. Online giving is one of the top ways. Donor management is one of the top ways, website. But you also see events, trips, HR, donor development, international support. You saw just bubbles go everywhere. And what's really interesting is really there's entire products that are just one of these segments. And it's pretty wild to see that SiteStacker does more. And we could put more here, but there's no room on the screen. There's a lot more use cases that are technically supported by SiteStacker. And so what's interesting about this is it can be very easy to think that SiteStacker is one of these. For instance, SiteStacker is, sorry, I got ahead of myself there. SiteStacker is an online giving platform, or a donor management platform, or a website platform, or a missionary dashboard, or CRM. We can think of it in those terms because that's technically the way the industry thinks of it. Like we have these SaaS platforms that do these specific use cases. And that's true, but it's not what SiteStacker is in totality. Like SiteStacker does online giving, and I think it does it really well. It does donor management, it does missionary dashboard, it does, and all these things that we try to do really well, but it's more than that. And I think as we've been doing some soul searching, we've kind of identified what it is. And it actually is right in line with this idea of being a missional innovator. And the reality is, SiteStacker is actually a framework. SiteStacker is a framework in which you can build these outcomes. And in many cases, our team has built those outcomes that you think SiteStacker is that product. I'm not saying you, but there might be a chance that you think SiteStacker is this website and online giving tool because that's what we built on the SiteStacker framework for you. But that is not the totality of what it is. It is a framework. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to break that down. But I really want to challenge the perspective, because if you are on SiteStacker right now, not only do you have a framework, but you have access to the full power of the framework. And that's part of the way we've structured our contracts. That's part of the way we've structured the access to SiteStacker, is you technically have the full power at your fingertips. Ooh, I don't know why I did that. The point is, you have the full power at your fingertips. And I really want to push that, because I think it's important to know that, because that allows you to innovate. And I'm going to break this down. And then by the end of this, you'll kind of see, hopefully, how I'm seeing this. So it's not a product with predefined limits. This is the common misconception, right? That we just talked about. It's a fill in the blank tool, but that may be a function of SiteStacker, but it's not what SiteStacker is. It's the framework that empowers those great functions. And so we don't have a boxed in product here. That's just the reality. There are very few limitations. Of course, everything has limitations. That's just the reality. We can't build the truly unlimited product because we're not in eternity yet where everything's unlimited, but it's about as close to unlimited as you can get. And I'm going to go over that because, again, I think part of this is training and awareness, and that's what we're honing in on in this next era. But let's get a little bit deeper. So the question goes, why do we think like this? Why do we think that SiteStacker might be a product with these certain limitations? And I know there's limitations, but I mean, why do we think it's a product that is an online giving product? Or why do we think like that in general when we're looking for a software? We're looking for these apps or these use cases. And they have this gift called so many apps, because the reality is that's just the way the industry set up. Is if you look for a SaaS platform, you're going to find a fundraising software, you're going to find a automation software. There's not a lot of those. You might find a website software. You might find a trip software, a volunteers. You can see how all of these different softwares are out there, and they're made for those specific purposes. And maybe there's a benefit to that, but I've seen a lot more drawbacks, and I'll explain. But I think that one of the reasons is this major problem that I've identified. So I'm going to be real transparent with everyone. A major problem in the world of technology right now, especially missional technology, because there's not a lot of truly missional driven software products. That's just the reality, sadly. And even less missionally driven products that have the sustainability to really support a large scale of clients and users. But that being said, this problem is called investor driven marketing. I've seen it. I'm very aware of the market. If you tell me a software that you've seen, I've most likely evaluated it, because I'm always trying to see what's going on in the innovation side of things. And what I've found is there are some innovations. I'm not trying to discount that, but most of the modern SaaS platforms are very gimmicky. That's just what I found. Okay, and I mean that in the sense of their marketing strategy. It's focused on features. So most of the nonprofit software landscape is filled with SaaS platforms that, at the end of the day, if you actually look at it, and you can, are controlled by investor dollars. They have a group of investors, one major investor. I don't know, but they're not owned by the mission. They're owned by the investors. Maybe those investors are missional, although from what I've seen, that's not typically the case. And because they're controlled by these investor dollars, they're focused on marketing features for rapid sales. So that's what you'll see. I mean, I just listed some that I just randomly pulled from the web: responsive fundraising, AI intelligent asks, donor retention dashboards, smart donor management, ultra swift recurring donation. These are all just kind of marketing terms, but the entire marketing strategy of these softwares, each of those is a different software, by the way. This is not like one software that's marketing these features. These are the unique softwares and these are their value propositions, which are very vague, by the way. Like I don't really know entirely what it does, and also very focused. And what happens is it creates this cycle, because why do they market these features this way? Because they're trying to find the killer feature that will get people to buy sales. And it's the game of churn and burn. That's just the reality. The retention rate is very low. You get someone's foot in the door because of that one feature, which might even be a cool feature, to be honest. So I'm not discounting the features. Some of these are cool features, but that one feature is kind of the entire product at the end of the day. And then that feature draws people in the door, and then those people end up leaving not a few years later. That's what I've seen. And it doesn't even matter because they're already bringing more people in the door. And the reason they're doing that is to make sure that the bottom line looks good for their investors. Just breaking you down how business works. This is not news. This is not revolutionary investigation. This is reality, is that at the end of the day, these softwares are being driven by marketing dollars because they have to satisfy their investors. And that creates a really big problem, because what happens is, and I've seen this many, many times as a ministry, you start to plug in softwares for these features. So, or even for these use cases. And what it creates is this stagnation of innovation. Why? Because reality is, if you're looking for fundraising software, you get a fundraising software. It has a feature that you need because you have a specific fundraising need. But then let's say down the road, your fundraising needs change and that fundraising software isn't optimized for those needs. Maybe you introduce child sponsorship, which is a very complex fundraising model, and you were just doing simple giving before. Well, now that fundraising software doesn't do child sponsorship. So what do you have to do? You have to either switch to a new software, because you have to support this new innovation that is driven by the mission, and or you have to introduce another child sponsorship software on top of your fundraising software, now creating this increased landscape of software products you have to support. And the hidden fallacy there, the hidden fault there, is that now these two softwares have to interact in terms of the data, just so that you can see how things are performing. And then you usually have to bring that back to a CRM or something that can be their source of truth. And so now you're creating this really complex ecosystem of apps that makes it really difficult to innovate, because every time you make a new change, you now have to see how that change impacts all these different softwares and apps. And that's really, really, well, it makes me sad, honestly. And I've seen it many, many times. And so what happens is, either you just don't introduce the new software, which means you don't do the innovation that you needed to do for the mission's sake, or you do and you introduce inefficiencies which limit innovation. So either way, this idea of these killer apps and all these different products have unique features, it ends up stagnating innovation, because also all of those products, for the most part, a lot of these products that are out there end up boxing you in. Like it's not a lot of configurability. They're not built like a framework. They're built to support the feature. And so again, just calling it like I see it, I'm super open to feedback on that. I realize I'm a little biased as I work with SiteStacker, but I believe in this because this is why SiteStacker is the way it is. We could technically build a boxed in product if we want. It's actually a lot easier to support. I mean, if it was about ease, that would be easy for us, but it's not our heart, because it stagnates innovation. All right. And this is where the difference comes in. One of the main differences, we have zero outside investors. I don't know if you guys know that. I don't know. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe we've said that before. We don't talk about it a lot, but we have zero outside investors. SiteStacker is different. We don't have any investment dollars. We're completely owned privately. And because of that, the truth is, we were made by missional innovators, and we were made for missional innovators. And our only stakeholders are the organizations that use our software. And that's why we take very seriously when we get feature requests, when we get product requests. These things are really important to us, because we're thinking about the people who are using our software, who are truly our lifeblood. Like we don't exist without you. And we're very appreciative and mindful of that. And so with that in mind, that's also that made by missional innovators is really key, because we were developed with missions orgs that were trying to innovate, but also for missional innovators. We're developed we developed a framework that's made for missional innovators to actually do new things on. Like I can't wait to see people build new things on SiteStacker that I've never thought of before. Technically, that's fully accessible to you. All right, we're gonna keep rolling. Not investor driven, mission driven, not a cookie cutter product. Not to down the cookie cutter products. Cookies are pretty delicious, but we're an innovative framework, and that can be used to build what a lot of these other products offer, but in one database, which is absolutely awesome if you do it right. We're not focused on features to market. Really, that's not our goal. You've probably seen that. We don't have a giant marketing machine behind us. Everything we market is pretty organically driven by what's actually happening on the ground, by the people who are doing those things. But our focus is outcomes that make a difference, not features. So we really want to make sure we're building things that can produce outcomes that make a difference on the field for the sake of the gospel. Okay, so then the question becomes, why the framework? Like, okay, you guys have point taken your framework. One that kind of scares me. Maybe that's what you're thinking. That kind of scares me because that means we can do anything, but that seems like a lot of work, right? That's okay. I have an answer for that. Don't stress about that. We can solve that. But two, why? Why would you choose to be a framework? And I think it really comes down to what we can do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a second here to illustrate all of the things you can do right now. If you have a SiteStacker installation, every single thing I'm going to show you, you will be able to do today if you wanted to. I mean, it's going to take training for sure, but the reality is you have that power and that access right at your fingertips. And every single thing that I'm showing you, you can do. Okay. And that doesn't matter what use case you use us for. Maybe you only use us for mobilization or you only use us for giving at the moment. It doesn't change the fact that this is fully accessible to you because of the framework nature of SiteStacker. Once you're in it, you're in all of it. Okay. You can build unlimited websites on one installation with high performance giving, the highest we've ever seen. And I just have to take a moment to mention this. Your checkout conversion rate in the SiteStacker checkout is 81% on average. Okay. That's the average checkout conversion in SiteStacker. And I just want to take a moment. The best that I could find, the best new fundraising software that I could find in terms of conversion rate markets their average of 47%. Like that is the best, most new modern fundraising software that I could find. And they're almost 40% lower than the average SiteStacker checkout conversion rate. And we could do whole webinars focused on why that is, but that's really cool. But not only do you have that giving, you have this tool that you can build unlimited websites utilizing that giving in different languages with different currencies, integrated signups. All of the front end engagement can be encapsulated in one SiteStacker installation. That's extremely powerful and it's very rare. But not only that, you can manage all of your offline gifts, your reconciliation process, donor advised funds, etc. Like all of those financial things that you have to manage, donor development, all of these things that you have to do in a typical CRM, you can do in SiteStacker. But not only can you can do it in unique and innovative ways. If you have innovative ways that you want to do donor development, you have the system, you have the framework to be able to build that. And by the way, if you have these innovative ideas, not only you're not by yourself, you can reach out to us. We're here to support those ideas. We're here to help you see those ideas come to life. That's why our team has become experts in the framework so that we can help these ideas come to life. But I'm even happier when you do it yourself. Even though that doesn't necessarily give us revenue, for me, that shows that innovation is taking place that's not stagnated by dependency. We don't want to be a system where you have to be dependent on us to do anything. So that's another thing you can do. But in addition, you can build unlimited custom relational data tables and connect them to basically anything. And I know this might be over the heads if you're not a technical user, maybe this is hard to conceptualize, but what it basically means is you have data and you have to track it. And SiteStacker is basically unlimited in the types of data that you track, the way you track it, and then the way you can connect that to basically anything else. So like imagine if you use SiteStacker to do a bunch of different things, like all in one. Some of you may. Technically, you can build unlimited custom data tables and connect those to any of those outcomes. Like maybe it's a giving outcome, maybe it's a mobilization outcome. You can track unique data. In fact, just to illustrate this point, I want to mention that over the weekend, not this weekend, but over a weekend, honestly, not even a whole weekend, it was just a couple hours. I built, because one of the things that we do, the coffee that's going to go to the person who wins the Wheel of Names spin at the end of this, that coffee is made by our coffee shop. It's a coffee shop we started a few years ago. And one of the things I was flirting around with is, by experimenting with this nature of the framework and all the possibilities, I was like, I wonder if we could build inventory management in SiteStacker and actually add orders and then track those orders as they come in and then track when they're fulfilled. And the truth is, I built that in 2 hours. Is it perfect? No, I could spend more time to perfect it, but I can technically do it right in SiteStacker. And that was a completely inventive idea. To go even crazier than that, I one day wanted to bring an NBA stats database into a SiteStacker installation and be able to generate business intelligence reports to visualize those stats. So I created a custom data table and did that. I am not a technical person and I don't know much code at all. So I am telling you, this is accessible. So that being said, we can build unlimited automations. You can go do this right inside of your SiteStacker installation, from simple events to enterprise level business processes, whether that's a donor gives $500 and you categorize that donor in a segment that automatically enrolls them into a newsletter sequence from MailChimp, or even inside a SiteStacker. That simple automation can be built right now. The other thing you can do, though, is you can actually automate an entire enterprise business process, which means a lot of you might be using that for missionary application process, because that's been the most adopted version of that. But something I want to challenge you on is that tool is not a missionary application process tool. We've just built missionary application processes into it. It's an extremely powerful workflow automation tool that can basically automate any process you can dream of. I mean, it really can. And a lot of what happens in the day to day is there's these redundant processes that happen without any automation or in any centralized database. Like, for instance, well, when I get this email, I send this email to this person so that they can send that email to that person. And then that goes around the chains. And then that happens about once a week. Maybe I struck some bells with that very generic process, because a lot of you have certain processes like that. I know it because we do. And one of the things we're doing is we're actually, as SiteStacker, going to be automating as many processes that happen internally as a company into Motion 2 as possible, because it's going to save so much time and also limit our need to remember things. And so that can be done right now. Like, you can start this moment, go into SiteStacker and you can learn it. Now, there's training materials. Go to see our automation webinar series. There's a lot of training materials for all of this, but also you can kind of go in there and do it now. And you actually have a sandbox where you can play around without worrying about breaking anything. All right. Again, hopefully this is kind of expanding some of the ways we're thinking about things. But in addition, we're not done yet. You can build completely custom business intelligence views that can join all of that custom data together in a helpful and insightful way. So any visual of data you want to build based on the data that's in your SiteStacker installation, you can build with our business intelligence tool. It's completely baked in. I mean, that's extremely powerful. And not only is that business intelligence tool a way to visualize data, but actually you can build ways to interact with that data from the business intelligence tool. And it's really phenomenal. And by the way, we're going to be diving into a lot of that in the coming months, showing you ways to do that. There's a whole bunch coming to give you insights, but I'm just trying to expand your idea of what you can go do. It's basically unlimited. Hopefully that's coming across. And then another thing is you can build custom dashboards. Like, you have your dashboard environment. Many of you have probably been in your SiteStacker dashboard. And the common misconception is that that dashboard is SiteStacker. It's not SiteStacker. It's a website built on SiteStacker. It is a part of SiteStacker, but it is not SiteStacker. And what I mean by that is, whereas you might go to another CRM and it probably looks a lot like our dashboard, the truth is it's boxed in. Like, you can't just build unlimited dashboard pages and user experiences in that dashboard, but in SiteStacker you can. So that dashboard, which looks and is pretty correlated in terms of user experience with another CRM, is actually a dashboard environment that you can build and continue to build on. And all of that data, this business intelligence views you'll see in this screenshot here, this is my coffee bean order thing that I made in a couple hours. You can build custom pages, but not only can you build those custom pages with whatever visual you want, but you can actually create unlimited access control, which means you can have different user experiences on that singular dashboard in your SiteStacker installation based on the user who's logging in. So if it's a missionary, they only see the missionary dashboards. If it's a donor developer, they're only seeing their donor list and tasks and basically whatever we want to show them. But if it's an admin, they can see all of it and it can drill up and drill down based on user access. This is so extremely powerful, and I don't think has been leveraged to the degree. None of this has been explored to the degree of possibility that is there. So again, just open in your minds, hopefully, about what's possible here. And here's the really just the icing on the cake. Every single thing that I just mentioned, you can do all of that without one line of coding. I mean, the coding is in the system, but it is a no code system. And I think that the best way I can describe this is not only can you do it without coding, but and many of you may not know this, if you have the capacity to code, if you're able to, if you're technical, you can code into SiteStacker. It's fully flexible. In fact, I'd call it a no code floor with a code anything ceiling, which is really awesome. I mean, you can build so much on this. And it's right there. If you set aside a little bit of time and if you take some time to learn the tool, you'd be shocked at how much you can learn to build yourself without needing us and without needing to go through a developer. But if you have development skills, then you'll be doubly shocked at all that you can really do with this tool. It's extremely flexible. So flexibility can seem scary. It's like, wow, that's really cool, but how do I contextualize? How do I actually take advantage of this? And we're going to walk you through those steps. But hopefully you're connecting the dots of why SiteStacker is really the tool. This is the tool for missional innovators. It's missional in its DNA. It's flexible so you can always innovate. It consolidates. I mean, you can actually replace so much with SiteStacker. And so we'll get to that, but really quickly, I went to AI and I just was having fun. I don't know if you guys use AI, but it's kind of good to get comparisons and research. And I said, what other nonprofit CRMs offer that capability? And I just literally all the slides that I just showed you of what you can do in your SiteStacker installation, I copied and pasted that, sent it to AI and said, what other nonprofit CRMs offer that capability? And this was its response based on your criteria. SiteStacker is the only system that offers all of those capabilities in a unified, seamless platform. You can go vet that yourself, but in fact, it even made a chart. And maybe I can even zoom in. I guess I can't zoom in. Hopefully that's clear. But basically, what you're seeing in this chart is SiteStacker is all the green checks. Then you have Salesforce, Blackbaud, Virtuous, Bloomerang, Donor Perfect, Civi CRM, whatever that software is. And the truth is, very few of them even do 3 of those things, let alone all of those things. And that's because the reality is none of those are a framework the way that SiteStacker is, just this flexible framework. And none of them would even care to build those because the truth is all of those companies are technically bigger than us. So in the world's perspective, they're more successful. In the world's perspective, they're maybe more, they maybe got the right strategy. But the truth is from God's perspective, from the missional perspective, I love where we're at because this is going to allow us to build on SiteStacker for years to come in a way that propels missional innovation forward. And that's what I want to say. We're not trying to grow into a Fortune 500 company. That's not our heart. We are missional at heart. What we're trying to do is grow innovative ways to propel the gospel forward around the world. That's our call. And we're at the centerpiece of the technology side of those things. And so we want to keep doing that. But that's kind of an overview of where we're at in comparison to these other softwares. Now, I want you to notice that all those things we just talked about were not features. They weren't features. They were possibilities, which again might be the scary part, but it's also the really cool part. It's the unique part. It's why we are so hard to elevator pitch. I've encountered this my whole time here. I've been here for almost 9 years now, and for that duration of 9 years, I've always had people go, "Hey, what do you do?" "Oh, I work for a technology company called SiteStacker." "Oh, what is SiteStacker?" "Oh gosh, do you have time?" Because it's just hard to explain in an eloquent and sophisticated way and very quickly. Because the truth is, we're very unique. There's not a lot of softwares that do what we do, and the reason for that is the mission. The only reason SiteStacker is the way it is because of the mission. We wouldn't do it this way if it wasn't for our missional driven purpose. And I think that's going to lead to really cool things in our future. And the other side of that is because we're so vast, because it's this framework. The truth is, you can consolidate a ridiculous amount of softwares into the SiteStacker framework. We've seen 20 softwares, 20 plus softwares, more than that actually, be consolidated into SiteStacker in one project because all these different softwares, remember the so many apps, investor driven marketing I was mentioning, well, I've discovered that because I've meet these orgs who have all these different apps that really we can replace all those apps in a more cohesive and seamless way. And it saves you time and it saves you effort, and it consolidates that data into one place, which allows you to innovate more because you're seeing and using the data to move forward. Those are some really, really cool things. So, and I think the best part, honestly, there's things that we at SiteStacker have been experimenting with on the framework. That's kind of this new phase we're entering, where our team is kind of leading the charge in experimentation on what you can do with SiteStacker. And it's pretty mind blowing. This is why I'm excited. This is why I'm so bold to share this information, because I'm seeing it happen. Some of the things that we are building right now and showing not only that we can build, we're not developing this with code, we're building it in the SiteStacker framework, which means that you technically would be able to build it too, or use the things that we build. But some of the things we're building now are just so innovative, like there's not even a frame of reference for it. You won't find another software that even knows how to talk about it, because it's not something that you would develop. It's something you'd experiment with on the framework. And some of the cool things, like we'll get into this in the future. We'll be talking about our product roadmap in the future. We talked about it at SiteStacker conference. We'll be doing a webinar on it, because we got to revisit that. But some of the features in our product roadmap were actually discovered. They weren't developed, which is so cool. That's why we're putting this time into experimenting. We actually got into SiteStacker, started playing around, and we realized, whoa, we can do this. This is something every client would want to do. We discovered that feature. We didn't develop it. And again, I don't think there's a better explanation of why SiteStacker is a framework and not a product, because I don't know of a lot of products where you can discover features like that you can put into your product roadmap, which is just super cool. And it's exciting. And so here's my call to you guys. It's time to dream. It's time to build. It's time to innovate. That's what we want to call you to do, to think about these creative ways to work with us. We have a solutions engineering side of our company that's ready to work with you to dream. I'm ready to dream. I'd love to hop on a call. Our whole team is ready to just build and innovate. Again, for the sake of the gospel, let's move this gospel forward. And I think that, in my opinion, this next era and where we're going with SiteStacker, I believe SiteStacker can become a hub of missional innovation for years to come. Like, more than just a product that different missions orgs use. I think SiteStacker can be a resource that is shared between missions orgs and that can be used to make innovation more efficient. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean, there's probably certain things that certain orgs on this webinar have solved with SiteStacker that other orgs don't even realize you can solve with SiteStacker. And that's what happens when you have these kind of isolated environments of the product. But I think where the next era goes is us collaborating. Not just us, but you guys, you, the missional innovators who are using SiteStacker, collaborating with each other and sharing that knowledge, sharing that information, because then that innovation becomes more efficient so that we can propel ourselves to more innovations. And that's my heart. That's like the vision we have for the future. And honestly, 60% of missionary sending agencies in North America use SiteStacker. Like, this is not a small hub of missional innovation. That's just missionary sending. We're seeing rapid growth in many other missional areas in terms of usage of SiteStacker. And because of that, I believe that this is not a small thing that's just SiteStacker specific. I think this can be something that can grow far beyond what we're thinking, but more importantly, can have significant impact on the ground. And so I think that's what we want. That's where we're going. And our team is here to support you as you do that, as you get into the tool, as you use it. It's our mission. But here's where we're going to go. I got limited time here, so I'm going to contextualize a couple things we're doing because of this. So we have this missional framework. It's not a product. It's a powerful missional framework. No code requirement means it's actually accessible to you. This is all accessible to you, even if you don't know how to code. And this combination means that the potential is very vast. It's extremely vast. I don't even know all the things that can be done here. I don't know. And I'm excited to find out, but we need help finding that out from the people who use the software. So the question is, where do we go from here? How do we go from endless possibility to practical outcome? This has been the biggest question on my mind recently, and it's where we're dedicating a lot of our resources. So let me show you what we're thinking, and there will be follow-up from this, and hopefully it's exciting. So how can SiteStacker framework become a hub of missional innovation? How are we going to do this? Well, we have to unlock the power. And part of unlocking the power is me explaining to you what the power is that's at your fingertips. And I'm hoping that I've kind of done that today, but this isn't the end of that. We're going to keep sharing content through webinars and other formats that are hopefully going to showcase how you can take advantage of the power that you already have as a SiteStacker organization and user, as a missional innovator. And then the other thing, which is really important, is increase accessibility. So now we know all this power we have access to. So give me access to it. Build a bridge from where I'm at to the power that I can take advantage of. And that's where we're putting a lot of our priority and resource. That's actually, in my opinion, one of the main reasons we exist in this next era, is to build that bridge of accessibility. Because if we can increase the accessibility, then we can decrease the distance between innovators and the power. And that means we're going to explore more of the potential of the framework. Here's how we're going to do that. Communication, collaboration, education. I like to make things rhyme. It's very fun, and I'm a rapper at heart. So that being said, communication. We now have a user discussion forum live on our training site. You can see it in the footer. We're going to send an email after this that's going to be able to link you to that. The entire purpose of this discussion forum is for users to be able to collaborate with each other, share some of the things you've done on SiteStacker, share some of the questions you have on how other orgs have done things. We want to encourage and cultivate synergy there so that you can actually start to capitalize on things that other organizations have solved using SiteStacker. And I think that's really going to help. So that's the first thing. We'll be sending a link to that. It's pretty simple, but it's something that we definitely want to promote more. Next up, collaboration. The SiteStacker marketplace. This is something we've been thinking of and working on for a while, and we are going to be launching it this year. And this is a place where you can go and see the different actual outcomes that are being built and have been built on SiteStacker. And then not only can you see them, but you can get them implemented for your organization. And there's multiple ways you'll be able to get those implemented. One, you're going to be able to work with our team to do it. Two, you're going to be able to configure it yourself with a configuration guide, because again, this is all no code configuration, but all these awesome experimental possibilities are going to be accessible through the marketplace, which means you're not going to be left in the dark knowing what's possible. You're always going to be able to go there to see the latest innovations and get them added to your installation. That's how this becomes a hub of missional innovation. But the third way that the marketplace is going to be utilized is actually leading to my next point, which is SiteStacker education. And this is not necessarily the marketplace, but it's going to be accessed from the same place. We are putting a lot of resources right now towards developing SiteStacker education. This is different than the training site. You can go to our training site now. You can access our support team, who are awesome, and I hope you're enjoying them. I see the really great feedback that comes in every week. I'm glad support is supporting you well. But one of the things that's really needed is context. These resources live kind of on an island. We are aware of this. If you want to go learn about SiteStacker, you have to know which resource to look for, and then you have to read it. Well, with that in mind, what we're doing is we're building actual tracks, training workflows. And by the way, we're going to be building this using SiteStacker. We're going to build this education platform in SiteStacker's tool. One, because it's easy and accessible, but two, because that just showcases that you really can kind of do anything with SiteStacker. Like, we can build education in here. But there's three ways we're really going to be doing this. One, collaboration sessions. One, webinars, actually. You can see we're here. Here we are. Hi, happy education. This is one of the ways we're going to be trying to educate, train, really getting this at a more repetitive basis to just increase that accessibility. Two, collaboration sessions. We're going to be setting up micro collaboration sessions that are going to be in person, where orgs and users can come together, not just at SiteStacker conference, but throughout the year, to actually brainstorm and solve problems together. So be on the lookout for that. I'm very excited about that. And three are these training tracks and these training workflows that our team is working really hard at, that are not just going to tell you, here, go to this component and do this. They're going to tell you how SiteStacker is built and how you can take advantage of that and how you can do specific things that you need to do. And I believe that that's going to change the game. That will come with certifications and all of that. That's really the next era. And this leads me to my last thing, because I only have 1 minute. I keep looking at the clock over here. A network of missional innovators. This is what we would be calling the Missional Innovator Network for now. This is why we introduced this concept of Missional Innovator. But the idea is we really need this innovation to come from more sources than just us. I mean, if we're going to propel this forward, if we are going to do this the right way, we need a network of missional innovators. And one of the things, if you were at our conference, that you may have realized, and if you're not, I'm going to share it with you, is how many users of SiteStacker have so much value to offer, their perspective, their skill set, all of that. In fact, there's so many people across the kingdom that have so much skill set to offer, but they need a place to offer it. And so we're going to be building a network, and we're actually going to have follow up from this probably within this week of early bird interest of joining the Missional Innovator Network. And it's going to be where we connect those who have skill sets to offer and those who need skill sets. And that's going to really help promote this hub. I'm very excited about this. More details in terms of how this will operate will be coming, but I really encourage you to keep your eyes out for when we announce the early interest list, because if you join early, there might be perks, and also that's going to give us an idea of who's interested so we can follow up with you. Very excited about that. That's how we're going to increase accessibility to this power. And that's the end of my presentation. So I don't know. I'm still here, guys. I accidentally hit the end call, so I'm still here. That's the end of my presentation for now, guys. I hope that was helpful. I really do, and I think that there's a lot of possibilities here. We're here to help, and I do want to mention that really there are no this is just one aspect of what we're doing. This is more philosophy. And so there's a whole wave of product development that we've worked on that's coming soon that you're going to want to see. We're going to be announcing that. With that in mind, I'm looking if there's any questions. I see more of a statement here. Um, Yeah, so motion, we're here to help you with taking advantage of the motion tool. So let's talk about that. I think there's a lot of possibility there, and the accessibility is there. We are working on a lot of user experience enhancements on our core product, so excited to show that as well. Now, before we wrap up, I'm going to do the wheel of names for everyone who's still here. So let's go ahead and click to spin, and I'm going to call out who won the coffee. Here we go. It's spinning. The winner of the coffee in the mug is Rebecca. Rebecca, congratulations. You have won the mug. And everyone, thank you for joining. We're looking forward to more webinars in the future, and keep your eyes out for the Missional Innovator Network and all that great stuff. God bless.